Hello my fellow weirdos, my name is Marie McWilliams. Welcome back to my channel. For today's video I'm doing a very belated December wrap-up. Hey guys, as I said, for today's video we're doing a December wrap-up. It's a little belated, mostly because every single day of 2020 so far I have been dying with a viral infection. You can probably still hear it in my voice. And if I start coughing uncontrollably during this video, then I apologise. I'm still not 100%, but I have to get back into the swing of things eventually. And I thought the best way to do that would be to start with a bit of a December wrap up of all the books that I read last month, which actually was a lot more than I thought I was going to be honest, given how crazy December is. Before I launch into my books, if you could please subscribe to my channel, I would really appreciate it. And don't forget to hit that bell button so that you get a notification every time I post new content. And you guys never miss out. Okay, so let's go straight into it. So, first up we have To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. This is a science fiction novel set in the future when a space program which has been funded by the people of Earth sends forward explorers out into the universe to explore various different possibly habitated worlds. And instead of the strange thing about this is instead of terraforming a world, which is the art of making the world adjust so that humans can survive on it, they do what is called soma forming, which is where the people themselves, the astronauts, go through change while in stasis, and physically they are altered and their DNA kind of rewritten so that they can survive on the planet that they're visiting. And it's about this one particular ship and them. The various worlds that they visit, the various aliens they encounter. And essentially when they're out there, decades pass as time does change. You know, it's obviously different in space, and the world is not the way that it was when they left. There is no space program anymore. It looks like there's been some kind of huge solar event with the sun perhaps wiping out a whole chunk of the population. Don't even know if there's anybody left. By the time they find all this, there's been like radio silence from Earth for years, decades, and they are sort of in a position where they are sending back the information, hoping somebody will read it, if there is somebody there to read it, and asking them to make the decision about whether they go forward or come back to Earth. And that's sort of how it's left. I really enjoyed this, I have to say. It's all from the protagonist's perspective, the report that they've written to the human that they hope will be reading it. I loved the worlds that they described, the species that they described, the science behind everything. I mean, obviously none of soma forming isn't actually real. It's not an existing technology, but it sounds like she has done a lot of research into the theories behind all these types of things, and obviously knows her stuff about biology and stuff like that. So it really brought the story to life. It made it seem plausible, believable that all this technology could exist and may someday exist. And I really loved the sort of philosophical nature of the book, the idea of human beings asking questions and exploring just purely for the sake of curiosity, for discovery, for no other reason, not to gain power, not to gain money, not to gain resources, just to know, to learn. The only part that annoyed me a little bit was that ending, in that they kind of leave it up to humanity. They can go forward to more planets, or they can go back to Earth, and they didn't want to make the decision because it was sort of a publicly run space program that they initially went up with, so they kind of leave it to the reader if anyone ever reads it. But that also leaves the possibility that they may just float forever in space until something happens to the ship and then they'll die. So I thought that was a bit stupid. I would have just personally taken a vote with the people on the ship and either gone forward or gone back. That's my sort of take on the ending. But I did really enjoy it, and I liked reading it from the perspective of the human who is getting this report back. So big, massive 4.5 out of 5 for me for that one. I'm really interested to read more of Becky Chambers. I actually got this in this month's My Chronicle book box, which I can put a little link to my last unboxing video, and you can use my discount code, which is mirrors10, to get 10%. I'll put all the information down below. Off their science fiction box, which is a quarterly box, and this was in the last one. It's hardback, it's signed. Yeah, so that really good read, recommend that. Okay, next up we have The Last Sister by Kendra Elliot. This is a bog standard crime story where you have a situation where everybody has secrets, and after a murder happens and an investigation starts, all these secrets start to unravel and nobody is who they seem to be and nothing is it as it appears. And oh, it's just my cup of tea, exactly. It's about a family with 3 young daughters whose father is brutally murdered when they are children. Decades later, one of the sisters left the day after the father murdered hasn't been seen since. The 2 that are left, one of them finds their close friend and her husband murdered in a very similar fashion to her father. And this brings the FBI into the town to investigate what happened to her father and what happened to this particular family. And all the secrets then begin to be revealed, and it's really, really, really good read. It's one of those ones where I have to say, did not see it coming who the bad guy was, which I really, really liked. I tend to not be surprised by crime fiction. I tend to sort of know immediately who's the bad guy. I'm like, okay, so that's the killer. But I didn't see this one coming. I really, really enjoyed it. I liked the protagonist. I liked all of the various strands that get revealed, all the various different little plot devices. There are a couple of things that I think, I'm not sure why they kept these things secret. Like, they probably should have told each other. They should have told their fellow family members or whatever, and it would have solved a lot of issues and heartache over the years. But I suppose as a child you do what you do, and you kind of sort of lock yourself into that situation, so can't really judge. But yeah, no, massive 4.5 out of 5 for this one as well. I really enjoyed this book. It was one of those ones where you get to a point where you're like, okay, well, I can't put this down until I find out what happens. So literally just read the second half of it like, come on, because I needed to know. Next up, we have StaZr, and I am so sorry if I pronounce this wrong, by Any Ayarovu. I'm sorry, I'm terrible at pronouncing this. Essentially, this is a fantasy series, and this is created by this woman who's actually a doctor, and she wanted to sort of make reading more accessible in today's society where we are much more media driven, where we don't have the same amount of time to dedicate to reading that we once had. So each of the parts of the story are all quite short, designed to be ingested fairly quickly, but are also designed to be quite immersive and to create a sort of all-encompassing world. So for example, they actually hand burn the edges of the pages, if you can see that, for the book, which I really appreciate the effort there. And the little bits here, these are actual metal, stuff like that, and it came with like a little key and all. And it's very much multimedia oriented, so there is there are sort of snippets of people reading from it. There are actors acting out parts of it. There's going to be a game released. There's a YouTube channel, a website. There's this whole big multimedia kind of way of exploring this world, the world of Z. And it's supposed to sort of try and get people back into reading and create this big fantastical world. So I actually really enjoyed this. It's not a long read, it's a short read, and I think you can actually get it for free if you go onto their website. You can get the ebook for free, and yeah, if you're into fantasy, I recommend it. It's about a gentleman and his sentient pig human friend going on the beginning of their adventure that is going to eventually sort of lead to discovering everything about this universe and how they're going to have to inevitably save it. But yeah, this is just a brief introduction to the world. It opens up the idea of all these new races, these species that have evolved to be kind of humanoid like pigs, and this sort of class structure between them, that there's like a caste structure with pigs being considered less than the humans, the people who have evolved from human beings rather than the ones that have evolved from the animals that human beings brought. Things like that. It opens up this sort of political spectrum, and yeah, it's just like dips your toes in the water, but it's enough to definitely get me intrigued. So I want to be reading more about this world. I'm not hugely into fantasy, but I did enjoy that, and I think the fact that it was sort of like slightly shorter helped me with that, because I don't know, I find sometimes fantasy can drag a bit slightly, but with that it gave me just enough for me to want more, if that makes sense. The other 2 books I read are actually on Kindle, and I read them on my phone. So the first one is a novella called Walk the Darkness Down by John Boden. Unfortunately, I can't get the cover up. It's really annoying. There it is there, briefly. It is set in the Wild West, kind of cowboy times of America. And there is a weird paranormal phenomenon occurring where a creature has taken over the body of a young boy, and he is going from town to town to town, murdering everyone, burning it to the ground. And he's doing it along this sort of deliberate pattern in order to create a doorway into a world where there are other beings, higher beings, godlike creatures, sort of along the lines of H.P. Lovecraft, you know, Cthulhu, that kind of thing. And this demon creature human hybrid thing, it can only be stopped by these people who fate has kind of allowed to live in this doorway. They can't get out either. They're sort of trapped in with this thing. And you've got a man who, his mother is murdered and burned out, and he is told that the reason that happened is because of a farmhand that she took in. So he is hunting the farmhand down for revenge. The farmhand, the one who's there, he isn't the one that killed her. It's obviously this big demon thing. He's the other protagonist, and then we have a young boy who, oh, how do you explain the young boy? His mother has died in childbirth, giving birth to two twin sisters, which are still alive but not human. They're like little balls of, almost like little tumors sort of thing. It's really hard to explain, and he can communicate with these things, and he brings them along with him, and I am guessing that they're able to live because of what's going on around them, because they're trapped in this sort of big hell-like scape that is being created by this demon. And these three are just slowly walking towards meeting this demon to kind of face their fates. And it is one of the most brilliant and disturbing books I have ever read in my life. It is really, it's oddly incredibly beautiful language. The descriptions that Boden writes are beautiful, but what he's describing is so effed up. So you're like, oh. There is everything in this. Like I said, there's these little tumor sisters that can talk, that are like just basically like teeth in an eye and a bit of hair. There is a pregnant scarecrow demon. There is soil that absorbs flesh. There is the demons that come from water buckets. There's all sorts of stuff. The main demon, the bad guy who's kind of opening this door, every time he kills people, he adds bits of their body onto his own. So he has like rows of fingers for like horns, and his skin is just covered in fingernails, and he's got so many teeth because he takes the teeth of all of his victims that his face is split with all these teeth that don't belong to him. And yeah, it's really creepy and weird, but honestly a fantastic read. Probably one of the best horror novellas I've read in a really long time. It was actually recommended to me by Mother Horror, aka Sadie Hartman, on Instagram. I'll put her link down below. She's great for giving recommendations. She's a professional horror book reviewer. So yes, 5 out of 5 for that one. I really, really enjoyed it. I genuinely just couldn't stop reading it, even the points where I found it was quite disturbing. I needed to read it. I needed to know what happened to the protagonist, and I wanted to understand what was happening to the world and if evil was going to inevitably win or whatever. Yeah, no, really, really recommend that one. And finally, we've got The Cult Called Freedom House by Stephanie Evelyn. So this one was actually the sort of book club of the month book with the Ladies of Horror Fiction, which is another place I get recommendations from on Instagram. I'll put their link down below, who promotes female horror writers. And as the name suggests, it is about a cult called Freedom House. We have a young runaway who's had a very difficult life, 14 years old, abusive alcoholic mother, watched her mother getting beaten and abused by various different men who come and go, poor and lost essentially, and she finds this cult nearby, and it's called Freedom House, and everybody there seems so happy and so peaceful, and it's like a lovely hippie commune. But obviously, as with all cults, it is not what it seems. The other protagonist is a police officer whose sister was kidnapped when she was a young child, never found out what happened to her, and now this is why she's become a police officer, and now as an adult she sort of projects what happened to her sister onto this 14-year-old and is determined to save this 14-year-old from the cult, and she goes undercover into the cult. And the cult is how to describe the cult? On the surface, it's all very nice. They're making their way to the journey of freedom. They use things like pain and sex a lot in order to free the mind and the body in preparation. Anybody who remotely questions anything or asks to leave is immediately murdered and fed to everybody else. There's a lot of cannibalism going on in Freedom House, and one of the ways that eventually you will make freedom is by eating your fellow free cult members. So yeah, it's a bit, yeah. So obviously we know where this is going. This is all going to go to a mass suicide kind of thing. So it's sort of like a race between the police officer and then this young girl slowly catching on to the fact that everything isn't what it seems, although I'm going to give it 4 out of 5, and the reason I marked it down a little bit is because I know she's 14, I know she's vulnerable and naive, but my God, there are so many warning flags, and there's so many moments where you're like, girl, go, run away, get out now. You know, like, everybody knows what cults are like, but there's been enough documentaries, there have been enough books, there have been enough movies, there's enough out there in the media for people to realise that cults aren't great things. So no matter how lovely and, you know, it seems at first, you should be a bit more wary, especially someone who's supposed to be quite a street smart kid, kind of raised herself. And when there are like literally direct warnings where they're like, yeah, you're eating a cult member there, it's like, oh. And she obviously is taken aback by this and is like, that can't be true, no way, but knows it is and still doesn't try to run away. Confused by that whole part of it. So that's why I marked it down a little bit. I also marked it down a little bit because at the end something happens. I don't want to spoil it, but it confused me and I don't understand. Something happens to a character and then the character isn't there and you're like, okay, did it happen or did it not? I don't know, it kind of confused me, but I do think this is the first in a series, so that I believe that's probably going to be explained in later books, which I am definitely going to read because I did really enjoy this. It's got just the right amount of violence and creepiness to make it seem believable, but like I said, at the same time, you're just like, dude, run, like, get out. And it kind of annoys me sometimes, particularly when women characters. I know she's 14, okay, I know. And I kept trying to tell myself throughout the book, but I was like, dude, they've told you you've just eaten one of your cult members, one of your friends. Can you just get out already? Yeah, anyway. So that's it, guys. That's my read for last month. What about you? Have you read any of these books? What did you think? Let me know in the comments down below. How was your reading month last month? Mine one is going to turn out a lot better than this month because I've been so sick. Yeah, I haven't got a lot of reading done, but hopefully I'll pick up the slack in the latter half of January. But yeah, guys, subscribe to my channel, hit the bell button, give this a little like, a little comment, let me know you're listening, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.